So nowadays, we're all used to seeing global outfits. Like it's not insane that you can wear an article of clothing made on every continent in one fit. But it obviously wasn't always this way. In fact, any earlier than 100 years ago, chances are you would get fitted for pants and a jacket, and somebody would make it out of the itchiest fabric you've ever felt, and that was it. That's your wardrobe until you die. In your 20s, probably. But what about before that, when traveling wasn't a fun, luxurious hobby for you to see the world, but instead a dangerous, lawless job that would probably leave you dead in a desert somewhere? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Rob, I'm ready to start, and this video is going to be a little bit different than anything I've done on this channel before. Last year I wrote my college thesis essay on world travel and fashion through the lens of 4 different world travelers. Each traveler is from a different time period, from ancient to medieval, modern, and contemporary, and these are not historical people. They did not exist, but they may as well have. The cultures I mentioned, the clothing pieces that I feature, and all the travels that are explained in this are historical travels that a lot of people went through over the course of time. I just put them together in this concise way to try to tell a compelling story of fashion through the ages. That's the title. Subtitle: The Eclectic Apparel of World Travelers. So we can get right into our first figure, who is the Parthian merchant. Now, the Parthian Empire was a really powerful and important dynasty in ancient times. They were around at the same time as the ancient Romans, but they came from Persian descent. Now, you probably know of the Silk Road, which facilitated trade of silk from China to the rest of the world. Now, the Parthians were the ones doing most of the legwork for this. But before we get into that, I'll talk a little bit about the Parthian clothing that this merchant is wearing. You can see first at the top, he's got a green headband and mid-length hair. This was typical for Parthian men at the time. He also has a pair of pleated trousers. These were very common in the Parthian Empire. You can see that I gave him more of a classic straight cut, but the wealthier you were, the wider leg your pants would be, and the more giant horizontal pleats there would be. This was to show that you had a lot of money and you could afford a lot of fabric. A lot of times people would put ornamental coins on each of the pleats as well. He's traveling all day, every day. He needs something that's not going to get in the way. And chances are he was also carrying a dagger on him. So the Parthians most commonly traded with the Scythians that took the goods from China and brought them to the outskirts of Asia for the merchants to pick up. At this time, the Han Dynasty was in power in China, and they brought a cultural renaissance to the country. They focused on music, infrastructure, record keeping, and Confucian ideals. However, in this time, the clothing style stayed pretty much the same from the Qin Dynasty before. A lot of silk robes that crossed over with ornate patterns. You can see our merchant is wearing a Chinese silk robe on the top with a pattern that's actually based on a historical garment, piece of fabric that was found from around this time. A lot of the travel that he was doing would either be on the river or on the back of a camel. He'd bring these goods all the way from the east to the west and trade with Roman goods of value as well. You can see a couple Roman clothing pieces that he has on. First of all, the boots, or known as gallicae in Latin, are a closed-toed shoe that came from Gaul originally. And the white cloak that he has on over his silk robe is an equestrian-style Roman robe. I figured out of all of the various styles of cloaks that the Romans wore, he would definitely be going for the equestrian because that's what he's doing every day. So that wraps up our first traveler, the Parthian merchant. Now we're going to focus on the Viking warrior. It's actually more accurate to say that this traveler is Scandinavian rather than Viking. Viking comes from the Old Norse word vik, which means to be on the warpath. A big inspiration for this character was a grave in Birka in Sweden. For years before, this gravesite was shown as a prime example of what a high-ranking Viking warrior burial looked like, and it wasn't until recently that they realized that this person is actually a biological female. You can see the Scandinavian articles of clothing that she is wearing are obviously her weapons, her sword, and her axe, as well as baggy pants and leather boots. You can also see her tasseled cap indicates that she was a cavalry commander under the immediate authority of a royal war leader, which means she was a leading member of society. Now, Viking travel was mostly done through their long ships that could fit down small streams and shallow rivers that nobody else could travel on in the water, and they would use these boats to trade with and also raid European societies. One of the cultures that the Vikings focused on raiding and also trading with was the Byzantine Empire. The capital was, of course, Constantinople, that was known for its thriving bazaars and multiracial population. This influence also reflected in their clothing, although typically women's clothing was loose-fitting to preserve Christian-inspired modesty. Now, lots of layers of loose-fitting clothing is not really conducive to a warrior's lifestyle, so I decided not to give our traveler any clothing pieces from the Byzantine Empire. However, she is wearing some golden armbands on her wrist that have intricate enamel inlays and were popular in the Byzantine Empire at this time. She would not be wearing these into battle, but because they are gold and elaborate, it is likely that a Viking would take this on a raid. Now, the furthest east that Vikings were recorded traveling at this time was into Baghdad, which was the capital of the Abbasid Empire at the time. The Abbasids overthrew the Umayyads and really focused on trade, art, and science. And generally speaking, the further away from home that the Vikings went, the more likely they were to trade than raid. Now, the general clothing style in the Abbasid dynasty was layered linen, gender-neutral garments. Also at this time, around the 8th century, Muslim men started to wear turbans. Our traveler is wearing a knee-length kamis, which is the collarless shirt that is embroidered around the collar based on a historical piece that I'll show here. Our next traveler is the French fur trader from the early modern period, about the 16 or 1700s. At this time, Louis XIV was the king in France, called himself the Sun King, instituted an absolute monarchy, and this absolute power led to a lot of regulation in French life of publishing, trade privileges, permission to hold most jobs. Now, the middle class of France grew tremendously at this time, which led to a lot of people wanting to stand out with their garments, even though they weren't the highest in society. Because of this desire for French people to outdo each other through fashion, it was noted that in the courts, good taste was swamped by the desire for magnificence. I love that quote. However, the common and humble man maintained the cavalier style that emerged at the beginning of the Baroque period. It was characterized by a doublet, which is a snug jacket, wide pants, knee-length boots, and a wide-brimmed Rubens hat. You can see our traveler is still wearing the jacket, pants, and boots from his home culture. His boots actually have a pronounced heel, which is new from this time, came originally from Iranian boots, made it very easy to fit in the stirrups of a horse. Because Louis XIV had long hair and a clean-shaven face, this became the norm in France at the time. And you can also see he's wearing a steel sword for his self-defense. Now, this is around the time that North American colonization and all the awful things that came with it started. Our traveler specifically is trading beaver furs with the Native American people in modern-day Quebec. He would be doing most of his trading with the Algonquin people that lived in Quebec and Ontario at this time. Algonquin and Algonquian are not the same. Algonquian is a linguistic group. This is a specific group of people that were the Algonquins. Accessories in Native American culture were adorned with wampum, which are small beads that would be put on necklaces, chains, and belts. Our traveler is wearing a wampum belt strewn across his shoulder with a depiction of an axe. This is from an actual Algonquin artifact from 1671 that were found in Quebec, and the purple beads are made from clamshells, and the white beads are made from whelk shells. This is traditionally a ceremonial item, which indicates that our traveler has immersed himself in the Algonquin culture. One of the main places that these beaver furs were traded to was Russia. They had this trade secret where they were able to remove the coarse water repellent furs from the beaver pelt and just leave the soft fur. Now, our traveler is wearing a beaver cap that he most likely brought the product to Russia. Now, at this time, Peter the Great of House Romanov was the Tsar of Muscovy, which is known as the Principality of Moscow. This territory goes all the way from Poland to the Caucasus Mountains in Asia, to the Pacific Ocean, down to Siberia. It was a huge empire at this time. Now, our last traveler of the contemporary age is the American hobbyist. You can see they are decked out in all modern clothes, so this one will be fun. Now, I wrote this person into the reality of the 2020 pandemic. She is a American citizen that is from East Asian descent. She is half Japanese and half Korean, but she's never gotten the chance to explore outside of the United States. So now with increased remote work, she's not tied down to an office and she's able to travel. Even though it might not be the safest to travel, she wants to take this time that she's not stuck in an office to go to see Asia. She is from Minnesota. I wanted her to wear some Red Wings, so I made her from the home state of Red Wing boots. She's also wearing a hoodie that's just a random hoodie that unfortunately was most likely made taking advantage of cheap labor. Another big difference is that our traveler from 2020 is not carrying a weapon on her, mostly because you cannot take weapons through TSA if you're planning to fly to a different continent. A lot of the work that used to be done through traveling alone is now done remotely, and the people traveling are doing it for fun. Now, the first step of her trip is to Japan, where her father's family is from. Now, to jump right into Japanese denim, in the middle of the 20th century, the Japanese culture was exposed to the American way of making denim through selvage machines, through loom machines, made a more durable product. Unfortunately, in the US, when jeans became more of a fashion item than workwear, they went away with this manufacturing process pretty much entirely. So Japan picked it up. So when our traveler arrives in Tokyo, she takes a trip around the city and finds the Momotaro storefront and is amazed by the quality of the jeans that she finds. Momotaro means peach boy, which comes from a traditional Japanese fairy tale where a boy was born into an elderly couple who regained their youth from a peach they found floating in the river. After the leg of her trip in Japan, she moves on to Seoul of South Korea, where she spends the whole day exploring the city. Now, as you know, South Korea is a hub of cultural phenomenon, from fashion to music to movies. They really put a lot into the entertainment infrastructure in South Korea. This began in the 90s when the South Korean government really focused on internet connection and producing talent that the rest of the world would come to adore. One of Seoul's most cutting-edge fashion companies is Eastlog, a company that combines traditional elements of fashion with sportswear. This creates a style that's familiar while really pushing boundaries at the same time. Our traveler is wearing a puffer jacket that's based originally on a Swedish motorcycle jacket that came in leather and canvas for police officers and military. The coating of the outer shell is water resistant and it's filled with goose down. So by the end of her trip, our traveler has acquired Japanese jeans that are modeled from and improved upon American design, and a Korean jacket based on a piece of classic Swedish clothing. So she has truly achieved the globalized outfit. And yes, if you know me, I did make her dress like I dress. Fashion differs from time period and location and can range from being totally utilitarian to being an indication of somebody's wealth. Now, obviously, clothing is still a way to show your wealth, but now more than ever, the cost of an article of clothing is not the only judgment of what makes it valuable. The way an individual puts clothing pieces together to make an outfit, often combining different price points and makers, really makes a outfit compelling. Now, count your blessings that today you don't need to ride a camel across a desert or a longboat through a shallow river to get clothing pieces from all over the world. I hope you like this video. This is definitely something different from me. I put out all types of videos between fashion, music, vlog. Check out my website, r2start.com. Follow all the socials, subscribe, all that stuff. Got much more coming before the end of the year. Thanks for staying tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.